He told everyone I wasn't a real woman, and they laughed. That's how the night started to end. My name is Carolyn Copeland, 35 years old. If you'd met me 2 years ago, you might have called me steady, reliable. The kind of woman who remembers birthdays, keeps promises, waters plants, even when she's tired. I believed in the quiet kind of love, the one that doesn't need to shout to be real. But that night, as the laughter rippled across a table full of champagne glasses and ring lights, I realized the world I'd built with my husband wasn't quiet love anymore. It was an echo chamber, and I was the only one left listening. Tony had once been my center. When we met in finance, two analysts buried in spreadsheets, he was charming, ambitious, the kind of man who walked into a room like he already owned it. I loved that confidence. I thought it balanced me, grounded us. When he decided to quit corporate and build his own brand, I was proud. I handled the bills, the rent, the stability. He said he wanted to inspire people, become a voice for modern men. Back then, I didn't know modern meant podcasts about dominance and YouTube sermons on how women like me were holding men back. At first, I laughed it off. He said it was research, that I shouldn't take it personally. But slowly the language changed. Compliments turned into comparisons. You're great, Carolyn, but you don't push yourself. You're too safe. Safe. It used to mean trustworthy. With him, it started to sound like boring. The night of the dinner party was supposed to be a celebration. Tony had hit 100,000 followers on his channel. His new friends, coaches, influencers, self-proclaimed visionaries wanted to toast him. He asked me to come, said I should see what real ambition looks like. I remember what I wore, a cream silk blouse tucked into black slacks. Professional, simple me. When I stepped out of the bedroom, Tony frowned. You look corporate, he said. I am corporate, I smiled. He rolled his eyes. Just saying. Maybe try to look less HR, more high value. I swallowed the sting and changed my lipstick. Red for courage. The restaurant was one of those rooftop places where everyone pretends they're not freezing for the sake of a skyline photo. Tony slipped into his stage voice as soon as we arrived. Firm handshake, confident laugh. A man rehearsing his own myth. His friends matched him, expensive watches, loud opinions, the kind of charm that never makes room for a pause. They talked about success, discipline, alpha energy, and choosing women who bring peace, not drama. No one noticed how ironic that sounded. I stayed quiet, smiling when spoken to, trying not to shrink in my own skin. When someone asked how long we'd been married, I said softly, 2 years last week. Tony chuckled just loud enough. 2 long years, he said, glancing around the table. But she's a good one. Keeps the house in order, keeps me fed, never complains. Not exactly the fiery type, but hey, someone's got to be the support staff, right? Laughter, light, polite, cruel. Then he added, she's like a golden retriever, sweet, loyal, house-trained. The laughter grew louder. One of the women winced. Another whispered, oof. I felt the heat crawl up my neck, but I didn't say a word. I smiled, the kind of smile that keeps you from crying in front of strangers. Tony looked at me, expecting me to play along. Oh, relax, babe, he said, still grinning. They know I'm kidding. I nodded, because what else was there to do? But inside, something snapped so quietly I almost missed it. On the drive home, the silence was so thick it felt alive. Streetlights flickered across his face as he scrolled his phone. He didn't notice me watching him, didn't see the exhaustion in my eyes. I wasn't angry. Not yet. Just done. Done apologizing for being gentle in a world that mistook cruelty for strength. Done loving someone who only felt powerful when I was small. In bed that night, Tony fell asleep mid-scroll. His arm brushed mine, and I flinched without meaning to. I stared at the ceiling until dawn painted the walls pale gray. That's when the thought finally formed, quiet, steady, undeniable, I'm leaving. Maybe not today, but soon. It wasn't rage that decided it. It was peace. The kind that comes when you finally stop trying to convince someone to see you. I turned toward him one last time, watched his chest rise and fall. He looked content, smug, even the hero of his own story. He had no idea the chapter had already ended. I slipped out of bed and went downstairs. The kitchen was cold, the coffee pot hissed softly. Outside, the city was waking up, car horns, birds, the hum of other people's lives. Mine was about to start over. The next morning didn't begin with a fight. It began with quiet. The kind of quiet that feels heavier than shouting, like the air itself is holding its breath. I stood in the kitchen coffee mug, warm in my hands, staring at the faint ring it left on the counter. Tony was still upstairs. The same man who called me a golden retriever in front of strangers now slept peacefully in our bed like nothing had happened. For years, I thought that was love, someone feeling comfortable enough to hurt you and expect you to stay. The clock ticked softly. 6:42 a.m. By the time he walked in, I already knew what I was going to say. I just didn't know how it would sound. He shuffled in phone in hand, wearing that smug, half-awake grin he reserved for mornings when he didn't remember what he'd done the night before. "You're up early," he mumbled, scrolling through his notifications. "Didn't sleep much," I said. He didn't look up. Too much caffeine again, I shook my head. Too much thinking. That got his attention. He glanced up, brow creasing slightly. Thinking about what? "Last night." He sighed loudly. The kind of sigh that says, "Here we go again. Carolyn, come on. You're not still mad about that, are you?" "I'm not mad." "Good," he said, pouring himself almond milk, even though he'd mocked me for drinking it 2 weeks ago. Because honestly, everyone knew I was joking. I studied him for a moment, the way he moved, the ease of his body language. He really believed he hadn't done anything wrong. "It wasn't the joke," I said softly. "It was how comfortable you were telling it." Tony set the milk down a little too hard. "You're overreacting again. You always do this. You twist something harmless into some big emotional moment." "Harmless," I repeated. "That's what you call it." "Carolyn, you're too sensitive. You take everything like a personal attack. I can't even talk freely around you anymore." I almost laughed. "Freely," I said. "You mocked me in front of 8 people and called it humor." He groaned, dragging a hand over his face. "You know what? I don't have time for this drama. I've got a call with a sponsor at 9. "Of course," I said. Always another meeting, another brand, another person to impress. He turned, then eyes narrowing. "What's that supposed to mean?" "It means," I said quietly, "that I'm tired, Tony. Not angry, just tired." He frowned, unsure how to react to calm. He was used to tears or begging something he could win against. Instead, I stood and pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the tile like punctuation. "I think it's time you move out," I said. His laugh was quick, sharp. "What?" "I said you should move out. You've been saying for months how much you want space, how stifled you feel. Well, here it is." "You're joking," he said. I looked him in the eye. "No, I'm finally listening to you." He stared at me like I'd started speaking another language. "Wow," he said after a beat, crossing his arms. "So now you've got a backbone. Took you long enough." "Took you long." I nodded slowly. "Guess so." I walked past him up the stairs into our bedroom that still smelled faintly of his cologne. I opened the closet and began pulling his jackets off the hangers. He followed, voice rising now. "What are you doing?" "Helping you pack," I said, folding his shirts neatly into a suitcase. "Carolyn, stop. You're not thinking straight?" "I've been thinking straight for months," I said without looking up. He hovered in the doorway, torn between disbelief and arrogance. "You're really just going to let me go like that?" I met his eyes. "You already left Tony. I'm just catching up." That landed. For a moment, he didn't say anything. His confidence cracked, just barely. Then he laughed again, but softer this time, uncertain. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," I said, "but at least it'll be my regret." He left that afternoon. No slammed doors, no apology, not even a backward glance. He carried his duffel and laptop bag to his car while I stood at the window, hands around my mug, watching the back of his head disappear down the driveway. The house fell silent as soon as the engine started. It wasn't peaceful yet, just hollow, like the echo of a sound that used to mean something. I sat on the couch, knees drawn to my chest, staring at the spot where his sneakers always sat by the door. And then, for the first time in a long time, I exhaled without flinching. It didn't feel like loss. It felt like air finally returning to a room that had been sealed too long. That night I didn't cry. I didn't drink wine or text my friends or scroll through his profile. I just lay there in bed watching the shadows on the ceiling, realizing something strange. The silence wasn't unbearable. It was relief. The first morning alone felt wrong in all the quiet ways. No sound of his electric toothbrush. No clatter of protein shake bottles. No voice calling. Where are my keys? Just stillness. And for a moment I stood in the middle of the kitchen, unsure if the silence was peace or grief. The sunlight was soft that day, like the world was trying to be gentle with me. I brewed coffee, forgot the sugar, and still drank it. My reflection in the window looked strange, like a version of myself I hadn't met in years. I wanted to cry, but nothing came. Maybe because you can't mourn something that stopped existing long before it ended. That week passed in a blur of motion without meaning. Work, eat, sleep, repeat. The house felt bigger somehow, like the walls had stretched. Every object carried an echo of him, the half-empty bottle of cologne, the dent in the couch where he used to sit, the toothbrush I couldn't throw away yet. But the strangest part wasn't the emptiness. It was the calm beneath it. No sharp words, no eggshells, no pretending, just me. Sometimes healing doesn't arrive as fireworks. It arrives as silence that no longer hurts. A few days later, my friend Mira stopped by, unannounced, carrying takeout and wine. When I opened the door, her eyes widened. "You look peaceful," she said cautiously. "Don't say it like it's a disease." She grinned, stepping inside. "You're not even crying. I expected mascara streaks and sad playlists." "I think I already cried all my tears years ago," I said, setting plates on the table. "The night he started calling ambition masculine energy." Mira laughed, then grew serious. "I saw his new post this morning. He's already doing collabs with that Alpha in Motion guy." "Good for him," I said. "He finally found an audience that claps when he talks over them." "Savage," she said. "I like this version of you." I smiled faintly. "So do I." Days turned into weeks. I didn't check his profile, not out of strength, but because I didn't want to feed the ghost. Instead, I started small things I'd abandoned. I went back to the gym. My body protested at first, the ache in my arms, the sting of breathlessness, but it felt real. Pain with purpose. For the first time in months, I slept through the night. Then one morning, I walked past the dusty piano in the corner. The lid creaked when I opened it. My fingers hesitated over the keys, trembling slightly. The first notes were off-key, clumsy, almost embarrassing. But the sound filled the space in a way his voice never had. It wasn't beautiful. It was honest. One Sunday afternoon, I finally told my brother. We sat on my balcony, sharing leftover pizza in silence. "So, he's gone," I said. He didn't flinch. "Good. That's all you have to say. I've been waiting for you to realize it wasn't love. He treated you like a pause button, something to press between ego boosts." "That's harsh." He shrugged. "Truth usually is." I looked out at the skyline, the fading orange light bathing the city. "I still don't hate him." "You don't have to," he said. "Just stop excusing him." I nodded, slow and quiet. 2 months passed before I heard his name again. A message popped up from an old coworker. "Hey, not to gossip, but have you seen Tony's latest drama? His new girlfriend called him a scammer on a live stream. Yikes." I didn't respond, but curiosity, familiar and unwanted, got the better of me. I opened his page. The man who once preached discipline and dominance now posted motivational quotes about betrayal and finding yourself again. Photos of him looking away from the camera. Jaw clenched, pretending to be reflective. He wasn't the villain in his story. He was the victim now. I stared for a long time, not feeling anger, just pity, because I finally understood he hadn't changed. He was still performing even in his downfall. That night I lay in bed with my window open, the city humming softly below. For the first time I realized I didn't feel lonely. I felt alone, and that was different. Lonely is waiting for someone to fill a space. Alone is realizing it belongs to you. I turned off the light and whispered into the dark, "I'm okay." The words weren't dramatic. They weren't triumphant. But they were true. And sometimes truth is louder than closure. 3 months after he left, I stopped waiting for the other shoe to drop, and then it did. It didn't come in a text from him or some dramatic apology. It came quietly through the mouths of mutual friends who couldn't resist the thrill of bad news. I was in line at a cafe when Mira texted me. "You dodged a bullet, babe. He's in trouble." I frowned. What now? She sent a link to a gossip forum I didn't even know existed, small, messy, full of screenshots. There was Tony, my ex, his face half-cropped, beside a headline, "Self-proclaimed alpha coach accused of scamming followers." Apparently, one of his investment mentorships turned out to be smoke and mirrors. Clients had paid thousands for financial freedom coaching, only to find he'd used their money for luxury rentals and sponsored content. He'd gone live to clear the air, blaming jealous competitors and cancel culture. The video had more dislikes than views. I stared at the screen, waiting for the satisfaction that movies promised revenge by karma poetic justice, the sweet burn of, he deserved this. But it didn't come. I just felt tired. Not for him, for the version of me that once thought I could save him. People always think the moment your ex falls apart, you'll cheer. But sometimes when the storm finally hits them, you only feel the echo of your own past mistakes. A week later, I ran into an old colleague, Nina, at the grocery store. She hadn't seen me since the divorce. After a polite hug, she blurted, "So, how's Tony holding up?" "Heard the crypto girl left him." "Crypto girl," I repeated, confused. "Oh, the one he dated right after you." She ran one of those manifesting accounts. They were doing podcasts together. until she found out he'd been flirting with her assistant. I blinked. That was fast. Nina laughed awkwardly. Guess the high-value lifestyle wasn't sustainable. I smiled politely, thanked her, and moved on to the dairy aisle. But inside, I couldn't shake the thought, he's just chasing chaos again. Some people don't fall apart because of others, they fall apart because peace terrifies them. That night, I made myself dinner for one. No takeout, no background noise, just me and the sound of oil sizzling in the pan. Cooking used to be a performance for him, measuring plating, pretending perfection. Now it was something else. A quiet ritual. Proof that I could care for myself without an audience. After dinner, I scrolled briefly through social media, not to check on him, but to check on me. Photos of my apartment filled with plants and light. Small notes about gratitude and healing. The comments were kind, but one message caught my eye. From a stranger, "You radiate calm. Whatever you went through, you survived beautifully." I didn't know this person, but their words hit deeper than they should have. Maybe because that's what I needed to hear, that surviving quietly was still surviving. 2 days later, my brother sent a text. He's calling people to borrow money. Don't answer if he reaches out. I stared at the message for a long time. Tony so proud, so image-obsessed, reduced to desperation. For a split second, I imagined picking up the phone, offering help. But then I remembered the dinner table, the laughter, the way he looked at me like I was a supporting character in his movie. I deleted the message and went for a run instead. Outside, the evening air was cool. The sky painted in fading blues, the street lamps humming awake. As my feet hit the pavement, the rhythm became a heartbeat I hadn't noticed before, steady, self-made mine. Halfway through, I passed a cafe window and caught my reflection. Sweat-flushed cheeks, messy ponytail, no makeup, and I smiled. Because I didn't look broken, I looked real. That night before bed, I opened my journal, a habit I'd abandoned years ago, when Tony told me journaling was for people who don't take action. On a clean page, I wrote 3 words: I choose calm. No anger, no revenge, just direction. When I closed the book, I realized something. Tony's downfall wasn't my victory. My peace was. The first time I met Noah, I almost didn't notice him, which in hindsight was exactly what made him different. It was early morning, the park still wrapped in mist. I was stretching by the running path, earbuds and half awake. He passed me twice before I realized he was matching my pace, slow enough to be polite, fast enough not to intrude. "Nice form," he said on the third lap, smiling just enough to be human, not flirtatious. "Thanks," I replied out of breath. I'm still remembering how to breathe. "Then you're doing it right," he said. "Breathing's half the battle." And somehow that was the start. No grand gestures, no fireworks, just shared silence and steady footsteps. He was an architect, I learned later. The kind of man who noticed things, angles of sunlight, chipped bricks on old bridges, the sound of rain hitting different surfaces. He didn't talk about grind culture or high-value anything. He talked about space, how good design wasn't about filling rooms, but leaving them open enough to feel alive. I liked that. Maybe because I'd spent years suffocating in a house that looked perfect but had no air. Weeks passed before we exchanged numbers. He started joining me for runs more often, then coffee afterward. One morning, as I stirred sugar into my cup, he asked casually, "So what do you do?" "I work in finance," I said. "Corporate consulting. Spreadsheets, deadlines, small talk about market trends. It's thrilling." He smiled. "You don't sound thrilled." "I used to be," I admitted. "Then I started living for someone else's version of success." He nodded, quiet for a beat. "Then, maybe it's time you design your own version." It wasn't advice, it was permission. And that felt new. The first time he came to my apartment, I was nervous. Not because I wanted to impress him, but because I wasn't sure I remembered how to let someone see me without performing. He stood by the piano, tracing the worn keys with his fingers. "You play?" "Sometimes," I said, "when I'm not afraid to sound bad." He smiled. "You should play now." I hesitated, then sat down. My fingers stumbled through a soft melody I hadn't touched in years. When I glanced up, he wasn't filming or checking his phone. He was just watching. Not judging, not grading, just being there. When the song ended, he said quietly, "You look like yourself when you play." I didn't realize I'd been holding my breath until that moment. We weren't in love, not yet, but there was something holy about the calm between us. He didn't make me question my worth. He didn't make peace feel like boredom. For the first time, comfort didn't mean complacency, it meant safety. One evening, we sat on a bench by the lake, the city lights reflecting in the water. He asked, "So what happened before all this calm?" I thought about Tony, the laughter, the suitcase, the silence that followed. "He told me I wasn't a real woman," I said finally. because I didn't make him feel powerful enough. Noah didn't respond right away. He just looked out at the water, the reflection of streetlights rippling softly. Then he never knew what real power was, he said. Because it's not about taking up space, it's about making room for someone else. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I whispered, "Thank you." "Don't thank me," he said gently. "You already did the hard part." That night, as I walked home alone, I realized he was right. The hard part wasn't leaving Tony. It was forgiving myself for staying as long as I did. And for the first time, forgiveness didn't feel like surrender. It felt like freedom. The next morning, I woke to sunlight spilling across the floor. No tension, no dread, no voice waiting to tell me what I lacked. Just air warm, open, alive. I sat at my piano, let my fingers drift without thinking. Somewhere between the notes, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked different. Not happier exactly, but lighter. Because peace, I realized, doesn't always announce itself with joy. Sometimes it just arrives quietly and stays. It was almost poetic, really. Of all places to see him again, it had to be a wedding. The universe has a sense of humor that way, bringing you face to face with your past, just when you finally stop rehearsing what you'd say if you did. It was a late summer afternoon, the kind where the heat feels soft and forgiving. The ceremony was outdoors, string lights, acoustic guitars, champagne flutes, sweating under the sun. Noah and I arrived a little late, holding hands, laughing about the parking chaos. The moment we stepped into the courtyard, I saw him, Tony. He stood near the bar wearing a navy suit that didn't quite fit anymore. Thinner maybe from stress, maybe from vanity. His hair shorter, his eyes harder. And when he noticed me, the smile faltered just for a second before he fixed it back in place. For the first hour, we orbited each other. I could feel his gaze from across the tables, half curious, half unsettled. Noah was radiant in his calmness, greeting friends, pulling me into conversations, never once trying to own the space. He didn't need to. That confidence, quiet, grounded, was the kind that used to terrify Tony. During dinner, someone clinked a glass and joked about the lovebirds in the room. The crowd laughed. I didn't look his way, but I felt it, the tension, the weight of his silence pressing from across the garden. When I finally turned, his eyes met mine, and for the first time I didn't flinch. Later I went to get a drink. He appeared beside me like an old ghost stepping out of habit. "Carolyn," he said softly, "you look good." I smiled faintly. "Thanks, you too." He hesitated, studying me. "Didn't think I'd see you here." "Small world," I said. "Yeah," he murmured, his gaze flicking toward Noah, who was talking with friends under the string lights. "That him?" "Yes." "He doesn't seem like your type," he said, tone light but sharp around the edges. "That's the point," I replied. He chuckled, shaking his head. "Still quick with comebacks, huh?" I learned from the best. For a moment, silence. Just the faint hum of music and the sound of laughter somewhere behind us. Then he leaned in slightly. "So he's the rebound." I turned to face him, fully voice steady. "No, Tony, you were." The words hung between us like a dropped glass. For once he had nothing to say. His mouth opened, closed again, searching for footing. Finally he managed, "You've changed." "I grew," I corrected. "You stayed the same." He laughed softly, but it wasn't real. "He doesn't challenge you, does he? Looks boring." I met his gaze, unwavering. "He respects me. That's all the challenge I need." For a heartbeat, his eyes softened, almost regretful. Then he whispered, "Do you ever think about us?" I took a breath. The music swelled behind us. Sometimes I said, "When I need a reminder of what I'll never accept again." He swallowed hard. "Carolyn, I made mistakes. I got lost. But no one's ever loved me like you did." I nodded gently, "And no one ever will again. You taught me that love without respect is just dependency dressed up as devotion." He blinked, fast eyes glassy. "I didn't mean to hurt you." "I know," I said softly. "You just didn't mean not to." Noah found me a few minutes later, 2 glasses of champagne in hand. He glanced at Tony, then back at me, reading the air without needing a word. "You okay?" he asked. I smiled, really smiled. "Perfect." Tony watched from a distance as Noah handed me the glass and brushed a stray curl from my face. We clinked glasses, and I caught Tony's reflection in the window, just standing there, hollow, watching a life he'd traded for applause. For the first time, I didn't feel pity, just distance. Beautiful, merciful distance. When the night ended, Noah and I danced under the fading lights. He whispered, "What's going on in that mind of yours?" I looked toward the empty bar where Tony had been moments ago. Nothing, I said, just wondering how silence can be so loud. Noah smiled. "Maybe that's how peace sounds." And as the last song played, I realized he was right. Peace doesn't shout. It hums. Soft, certain, unapologetic. After that night, I didn't hear from Tony for almost a month. And when I finally did, it wasn't a phone call, it was a message. A single line. I hope you're doing okay. That was it. No apology, no explanation. Just the digital equivalent of tapping on a door he no longer had the key to. I stared at it for a moment, thumb hovering over the reply button. Then I locked my phone and slid it face down on the table. Because sometimes silence is the reply. A week later, a new number appeared on my screen. This time, it was his mother. Tony's been struggling. He's not himself. I know he hurt you, but don't throw away what you had. A real woman forgives. That phrase again, a real woman. The same words he once used to shame me, now recycled as a plea. I didn't respond. Because forgiveness, I've learned, isn't something you owe to people who confuse your softness for surrender. Life didn't suddenly become perfect after that, but it became real. Mornings with Noah turned into rituals. Coffee on the balcony, shared playlists, quiet laughter that filled the spaces where tension used to live. He didn't need me to be strong all the time. He didn't flinch when I was quiet. And he never once asked me to shrink so he could feel tall. We didn't keep score. We didn't trade apologies like currency. We just lived two people who had nothing to prove and everything to protect. Sometimes I still caught echoes of the old world mutual friends mentioning Tony at gatherings, or a stray photo appearing in a memories folder. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel that sting anymore. Just a quiet recognition I made it out. And maybe that's what healing really is, not forgetting the wound, but finally realizing it no longer controls how you move. One evening, I sat by the piano while Noah read on the couch. Sunlight filtered through the curtains, painting gold across his face. He looked up and smiled the kind of smile that doesn't ask for anything in return. Play something, he said. I did. Soft, steady notes, the same melody I'd stumbled through months ago when my hands still trembled with old fear. But this time the song sounded different, not rehearsed, not careful, just free. Noah listened quietly, then whispered, "That's what peace sounds like." I didn't answer, because I was too busy realizing he was right. People think closure is a conversation, a last word, a door slamming shut, but it's not. It's a moment quiet and unannounced when you realize you no longer need an audience for your healing. Tony once told me I wasn't a real woman, and maybe back then I wasn't, because real women don't spend their lives trying to be understood by men who fear gentleness. Real women walk away. They stop explaining. They build peace so solid chaos can't find its way back in. Now, when I think of him, I don't feel anger. I don't feel loss. I just feel silence. But it's not the silence that aches. It's the kind that settles. It's the sound of a chapter closing without needing applause. Sometimes when I play piano in the mornings, Noah will lean against the doorway, coffee in hand, watching quietly. And I'll think about how simple it all is now. How love doesn't have to be loud to be strong. How respect is the only language I'll ever need. Tony used to say that peace was boring. He was wrong. Peace is not boring. Peace is earned. He told everyone I wasn't a real woman. But what he didn't know is that real women don't prove themselves with pain. They just learn when to stop bleeding for people who never learned how to hold them. And that is how silence finally started to sound like freedom.